I had a coaching student last year, passed AZ 104 with 900 scores. Genuinely smart person, and she could spin up any service in Azure just in under 5 minutes from her memory. The very first week on her new cloud team role, her leader asked her to deploy a storage account. It took her 4 hours to do that. 4 hours for storage account? That's not because she forgot how. That's because every defensible name for the storage account was already taken. The resource group needs an approval. There was a policy in Azure blocking public access that nobody told her about. The deployment had to go through pull request with at least 3 reviewers. And the cost center tag, all of that was mandatory, or finance team would start pinging everybody within an hour. She would deploy storage account 100 times in labs, never once in the environment where other human existed. That moment stuck with me because I've seen it play out dozens of times, and it made me question something I thought I understood about how we teach cloud. I've trained over 500 people, boot camps, workshops, coaching, cohort based programs, and that story is not an outlier. I see the same pattern every single time. The learner spends about 6 months grinding labs. They can spin up a VM, they can configure a load balancer, they can attach a managed disk, and they can maybe deploy a template using Bicep or Terraform. Pass the exam, and they feel like they are ready now. Then they show up on the real cloud team, and the real job does not even look anything close to a lab. There's an existing virtual network with 17 subnets, half of which are documented incorrectly. There's a naming convention that conflicts with the legacy stuff. The deployment pipeline expects a service principal that nobody can find credentials for. Labs are always clean and empty. They have no organizational history, there's no policy, there's no human working alongside you. The things you learn to do in the lab is not the thing the job requires. Technical work on the storage account was about 30 seconds, as we all know. The organizational work was almost 3 hours or so. The lab taught her 30 seconds part, but the job is actually the 4 hours one. Now, here's what I actually think you should do instead. Pick something you actually want to exist. Something that is not a follow along lab or just a sandbox exercise, but something that genuinely solves a real problem in your life. A personal cost tracker, a notification service for when your power bill arrives, a backup automation for your photos, a static site for your resume that auto deploys from a GitHub repo, anything that when finished you would actually use. Build it on Azure or AWS or both, but build it as if you're going to use it for 2 years, which means you can't ignore the boring parts now. You have to give it a resource group, a real name. You have to think about cost. You have to figure out how to roll back when it breaks. Or you have to put it behind some authentication if it's exposed. And now you also have to handle the cases where the credentials expire. These are the exact skills that job requires that labs don't even need. The friction of having a real project actually forces you to confront everything a lab pretends doesn't exist. Things like naming, tagging, cost, management, just drifting or backup. Not to mention the update, logging, alerting, all of this stuff. None of this is interesting in the isolation, but all of them matters in the production. And the only way to learn them is to have something running long enough that you actually care about them. A lab you can tear down at the end of the session never really teaches you what running production feels like. A project you actually use teaches you that on day 14, when something breaks, you have to fix it. And you realize you didn't write down the password, or you have to recover from a backup you didn't take. And you sit down there at midnight pulling your hair out and you learn something about the labs, which never taught you this. That's the moment that turns a learner into an engineer. Here's how I think about it. Lab-based learning is like a fighting simulation, where simulators never let you crash. You can pull the stick anywhere, push the throttle to maximum, ignore every warning, and then simulation just keeps on airborne. You learn the controls, but you never actually learn the consequences. A real airplanes let you crash. A real projects let you fail. The fear of failure, the actual organization, financial, real world fear is what compresses your learning by the order of magnitude. I learned more from one weekend project trying to migrate my personal blog from WordPress to Azure Static Web App than I did in the 3 labs module combined. Because when I broke down the DNS, the site went down. When the site went down, my friend who hosts a podcast immediately texted me. The stakes were real and I fixed it fast because I had to. That's the loop. You build something real, you break it, and you feel the consequences and you fix it. The lab loop is just the opposite, where you deploy something, you click around, tear it down with zero feedback, zero stakes, and zero consequences. And of course, zero real learning. So I would encourage you to stop training in the simulators and get into the real plane because, yes, you'll crash a little, and that's exactly the point. And the reason I'm so empathetic about this, the lab industry has gotten really good at making labs feel like accomplishments. There's progress bar, completion certification, you finish module 14 out of 50, whatever that is. It feels productive, it looks productive, but you can put it on your LinkedIn. It is not productive in the way that matters. I've sat on hiring panels, we looked at resumes that listed 40 completion of Microsoft Learn modules and zero deployment in Azure or no projects. Doing all those modules of someone clicking through guided exercise, we did not hire those candidates. We hired those who at least have it one bicep template, even though it's badly designed. Because the personal project showed us that real decisions was made, real trade-offs were done, and real failures and real recoveries were happening. The 40 modules had none of that. I'm as guilty of this as anyone because I built lab content, I sold lab content. The content is generally good. Labs are useful, they're not useless, but they are the appetizer. They're not the real meal. And we, the training industry, have been pretending that they are a meal because it's easier to sell the completion than the competence. And if you're sitting on a stack of half-finished courses right now thinking, I'll learn cloud once I finish my course, you probably won't. You learn cloud the day you start shipping something into the production that you actually care about. Until then, you're simply studying for a test the job doesn't give. Here's what I know for sure. The cloud job is actually judgment in the messy environments. The only way to develop judgment is to have your own messy environment to be wrong in. Labs cannot give you that. Labs are too clean. They have to be clean to be teachable. What at CloudLearn, what I'm trying to build and what the best lab should do is to reduce the friction of getting your hands on real service. They are a faster on ramp to I have deployed this thing in the real world. But on the ramp is not the destination. The destination is the project that runs for a year, the system that breaks at midnight that you have to fix. Use lab for orientation. Use them to learn the syntax and use them to figure out what a service even does. Then leave them behind and build something real that you run, you break, and you fix on your own. That is the actual learning. Nothing else compresses experience the way that does. That's where I land this on. Thanks for watching. If you got a personal cloud project running up right now, drop the GitHub link in the comments. I want to see what you're building right now. Until then, stay curious and keep building.